Welcome back, everybody. Governor Greg Abbott declared bail reform as one of his top priorities this session. And yesterday, the Texas House overwhelmingly agreed to a majority of his proposals. KXAN's Capitol correspondent Adam Schwager joins us now to break this down. Adam, welcome back. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So we're talking about Senate Joint Resolution 1.
Yep.
We want to get that wording correct. The House approved that with 133 votes yesterday. Talk to us about what that legislation would do exactly.
Yeah, so joint resolutions are proposed amendments to the Texas Constitution. So what that means is it needs a 2/3 vote in each chamber of the Texas legislature. So it needed to get that 100-vote threshold. What this bill does is it takes some of the most serious crimes that you can be accused of committing, those murder crimes, assault with a deadly weapon, those sexual in nature crimes. It makes it so that if the state's attorney can prove to a judge with a preponderance of evidence, so more likely than not, that the defendant is either a flight risk, they're likely to not show up to future court dates, or that they're a danger to their community, then that judge will be required to hold that person in the jail pre-trial without a bond option. And you know, I think it was interesting when we opened the show here off the half hour, you saw Greg Abbott there. That was only 13 days ago, talking about how he wasn't sure if this proposal was going to get past the finish line. He said there was progress being made, but not sufficient progress in convincing enough Democrats. They needed at least 12 to vote with this. But as you saw, 133 votes in favor, only 8 against, and a lot of it was due to the changes that were made along the way from what the Senate originally proposed here to what the House actually ended up voting on yesterday.
And as we mentioned, the House has now approved this, so has the Senate. So talk to us about what happens next with this.
Yeah, well, speaking of those changes, now, because there's been a lot of changes, it goes back over to the Senate side where they have two options. They can either say, okay, these changes are too much for us, so we're going to go negotiate, send teams of 5 from the Senate and 5 from the House to negotiate on the languages, on the changes. Or what they could do is they could just say, you know what, we accept these changes. The House, you did a good job. We agree with it. And then what would happen is it gets sent straight to the voters. November 4th, on this next election, you will have the option to either approve this constitutional amendment and agree with the House and Senate yourself or not. And that only needs a 50% plus 1 vote.
Okay, so we'll have to wait and see what happens with what the Senate is wanting to do with this, whether they want to agree to the changes or go to conference. But there was one part of this bail reform package that faced some more obstacles than this one did. Talk to us about what changes that measure would make and why it's facing those roadblocks.
Yeah, so the other proposed constitutional amendment as a part of the bail reform package, Senate Joint Resolution 1, what that does is it says that people who are legally here in this country, if they are accused of certain violent felonies, it doesn't factor in that flight risk or that danger to the community, they would be automatically denied bail. It's something that was a part of Governor Abbott's platform at the beginning of the year. He said during that State of the State address on our networks that he was going, that basically people who commit a felony who are in the country illegally are inherently a flight risk, and that's why he says we need this legislation. But there was only 2 Democrats yesterday who voted in favor of that, so they need to convince another 10 people. So because it was a second reading and there is a third reading process, it did get passed on with that simple majority to a third reading. They were supposed to have that today. It was delayed initially to 3 o'clock. Then it was delayed again, I think, as they try to see if they can somehow convince that extra 10 Democrats. But one of the things that we heard from the Democrats yesterday was concerns over, if you're going to take these measures, why not just take them for everyone? Why have a separate class for people who are in this country undocumented versus just a citizen who commits the exact same crime?
Yet another thing for us to track, and I know you'll be following it closely. But Adam, thanks again for being here and for sharing this update.
Thank you for having me.